Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Grandma's Cooking with Grandma. Today I'm going to go over the basics of your pantry with you before we start our recipes. Just to show you what you should have stocked in your pantry. These are the usual go-to things that when you want to pull out a recipe, you'll have most of the things you need. You don't have to stop what you're doing and run to the store. So we're going to start off with what the basics you should have. You should have, of course, flour. You should have sugar, both white and brown. If you want to make oatmeal cookies, quick oats, you want the kind in the baking aisle, not the kind you would eat for breakfast. You want the kind that has quick cooking, so when you put them in the oven, they cook thoroughly through your cookie recipe or your muffins. Salt and cinnamon, baker's cocoa if you want to make anything chocolate, and I'll show you a tip to use that if your recipe calls for the bar chocolate, and I'll show you what you can do to make that into the bar chocolate. Peanut butter if you want to make anything peanut butter cookies. Baking soda, baking powder. Molasses is not necessarily a staple, but it's good to have it just because if you want to make ginger molasses cookies. And then of course the ginger is your next one. So those are your basic everyday ingredients that if you have on hand, you can pretty much make any recipe that's in your book. You also want to have a mixing bowl, wooden spoons, measuring cups, measuring spoons, a rubber spatula to scrape down the sides of your bowl, baking cups like this if you're going to be making muffins. You don't have to have these. You can butter your muffin tins, but these are just quick and easy. You put them in there, you put your batter in, and you peel it off when you eat it. And of course the 2 cup measuring cups and the 1 cup, all the different sizes of measuring cups and measuring spoons. You can use teaspoons out of your drawer, but if you can go to the dollar store and buy a set of these for $1.25, $1.50, and you've got all of them. 1 teaspoon, a tablespoon, right on up. So the other hint I want to tell you is, I mentioned it before in the videos, just to make sure everybody remembers, when you're measuring ingredients, you always want this measuring cup here with the spout right there is for liquid ingredients. The other end of it, I love this 2-sided cup. It's great. It's got liquid on one side and dry ingredients on the other. Your dry measuring cup is just a circle, just flat. The difference is quite subtle, but it is there. I'm going to show you with some water. Here is 1 cup of water, but in the flat measuring cup. I'm going to pour it into my measuring cup with the spout on it, and as you see, that was exactly 1 cup. And now when you measure this out, you can see that it's not quite a cup. It comes right below the line right there. So you're about a fourth of a cup short to have it a cup. So if you're putting a cup of milk or a cup of oil or a cup of water in your recipe and it comes up short like that, your recipe is going to be dry. The same thing goes for dry ingredients. If you measure out dry ingredients in one with the spout, it's going to come up to a little bit different. Now I'm going to show you this one. Here's a 1/2 cup of flour in the proper measuring cup, in your dry measuring cup, the one with the flat surface on it. And also what you want to do is when you measure it, you always want to take a knife or your finger and just scrape it along the side to make it nice and flat and even. So now when I pour this into my measuring cup, you're going to see, give it a little shake to make it, and you're going to see that I measured a 1/2 cup, and it come to a bit more than a 1/2 cup. So your dry ingredients comes up to a little more, and your wet ingredients comes up to a touch less. That can make a big difference in your recipe, especially with baking, because you want your ingredients to be the right amounts. So a little other tips for you is 1 tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. If you don't have a tablespoon measure, you can always go by that. So if you have just a teaspoon and you're out of your drawer, or if you're not sure what your measuring spoons are, if you need 3 teaspoons of something, that equals a tablespoon. So you can do that. And then you can take, 8 ounces is a cup, or 250 grams if you're doing things like that. Let me see if I can find this. I'm just looking in my book here. And you also want a collection of recipe books. If you don't want to buy recipe books, you can go online. There's a number of really good websites. Foodnetwork.ca has got one. My go-to is allrecipes.com. You pretty much can find anything you want there. They have everything, desserts, main dishes, savory, sweet, everything. So getting back to the weights and measures, 3 teaspoons is a tablespoon, 4 tablespoons is a fourth of a cup, 5.5 tablespoons is a third of a cup, 8 tablespoons is a half a cup. And for the liquid, 1 cup is a half a pint or 8 ounces. 2 cups, obviously 16 ounces, and 4 quarts is 16 cups, and that's a gallon. So if you're making big bowls of soup and it calls for a gallon of milk, or a gallon of water rather, then you'll know it is 16 cups. This is in front of this cookbook that I have. This one is the Betty Crocker cookbook. I've got a various collection of cookbooks. This one is Better Homes and Gardens. I always say Betty Crocker. The Better Homes and Gardens cookbook. And it's got a lot of everything in it. And it's nice because it's indexed, and then you can get to, you just find the tab on breads or cookies or, your supper dishes, grilling, it's salads, whatever you want to make. So for today's recipe, we're going to be making some chocolate chip muffins. Now muffins are pretty picky. You've got to do it just right. They are not a very forgiving recipe. They're easy, but they're not forgiving. If you don't do it in the proper way, you're going to find yourself with either real runny muffins or real dry muffins. You have to be very, very precise in your measurements with muffins. And you do not want to overmix your batter. If you overmix your batter, you're going to have dried out muffins. And if you don't mix it enough, you're going to have holes in your muffins. Like, you cut into it, you break it open, and there's going to be a bubble that pops, the air bubble, and it's going to impact your muffins. So let's get started with our muffin mix. I'm just using, in this Home and Garden recipe book, Better Homes and Gardens, it's got your basic muffin, and then it shows on the side if you want blueberries or cranberries or oatmeal or you can just make this basic recipe and add anything you want to it. Today I happen to have some chocolate chips on hand, and I'm going to be making chocolate chip muffins. So the first thing, and also with muffins, you mix your wet and your dry ingredients separately and then combine them. This is not one of those recipes you can dump everything in the bowl and just go from there. You can, but it doesn't really turn out all that well. So you need 2 bowls for this. So we're going to start off with 1 3/4 cup of flour. And we'll measure it out. Remember, like I said, let me show you here, get a good knife. When you measure out your flour, you take the cup, get it closer to the camera here, you take your cup and you take a knife and you scrape it right off so it's even. So you have a nice proper cup. This is my half a cup measuring cup because in my canisters a 1 cup one won't fit. So I'm going to put that in my 2 cup measuring cup container. So I need 1 3/4 of a cup. I'll do that again. You always want to measure exactly right. Give it a little shake to make sure it's nice and even. And there, see, I've done it 1 1/2, so I've got to take some of that out. Or add a little bit more, sorry. You need 1 3/4 of a cup. So, a little shake. And there we have it. 1 3/4 cups of flour. In the bowl it goes. So the next thing we need is 1/3 cup of sugar. Sugar canister here. And it's the same thing. You want to make it a nice even measure. You want to give it a shake. Sugar is easy. You can just give it a little shake. And there you go. 1/3 of a cup of sugar goes in. We're going to put that to the side. And another good tip to have, as soon as you think baking, especially cookies, preheat your oven. Turn on your oven while you're doing all this, and then it'll be ready to pop in. You always want your oven preheated, and because if you put your cakes and cookies in there as it's heating up, it starts to cook, so your cook times are going to be altered because it's not hot enough to cook it properly. So you have to leave it in a little bit extra, which may turn out to burn it or be a little bit dry, or maybe not even cooked right through the time it's given. So now back to this, we want 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Baking powder makes everything rise. And you want to make sure you buy one in a container like this that has a good tight lid, because baking powder will not work if it's expired or if it's dried out. It doesn't, it won't make your whatever you're making, it won't make them rise. So this one, you take it and you just scrape it along the edge like that, and let me show you, I don't think I got that. So you scoop it up and you scrape it right along this edge. It's handy that way, and that makes it a nice flat even half a teaspoon, 1 teaspoon. So 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And now we want 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. I used to always eliminate salt in my recipes. I thought, oh, we don't need the extra salt in our diet. And then my mother once told me that no, salt acts like a binder. So you need the salt in the recipes. It kind of holds things together. And it's not all that much. I mean, if you're on a salt restricted diet, then obviously you have to use a salt substitute. That's a different thing. But just for your basic recipes, it's not going to impact you that much. Okay, so now we've got all our dry ingredients. Just give them a little mix. And I'm going to set this bowl aside and get the bowl for my wet ingredients. Now for the wet ingredients, we need 1 egg. See, I didn't get out. It's best thing to have all your ingredients out, whatever you need. That way you can not only make sure you have everything before you start, but so you're not running back and forth. So we need 1 egg, and it says in this recipe to beat the egg first. So break it up a little bit. So you just want to stir it with your wooden spoon and give it a little mix. So that way it gets incorporated into your other mixtures quickly. So now we want 3/4 of a cup of milk. Again, make sure you use the measuring cup with the spout. You don't want to use it flat because you're going to get the wrong measurements like I just showed you earlier. So here we go. 3/4, and you always want to set your measuring cup down on a flat surface. If you hold it like this, it kind of shakes around and it looks, oh yeah, that looks good. But if you set it down right in front of you on your table, then you can actually tell where your measurements are. So I want 3/4 of a cup, and here we are. And there's exactly 3/4 of a cup. So you put that in with your egg. Okay, now we want 1/4 cup of cooking oil. You always use oil in muffins, not butter. Okay. And that was one of the things I forgot to get out. So that's what happens, is just stops the production for a second while you go to your cupboard. If you go through your pantry and you get all these things out, and then you can be sure, go through your recipe, check off the list, check with the ingredients you have to make sure you have everything you need, and then go ahead and start your mixing, because it's really not fun to get like halfway through and realize that you're out of an important ingredient. If you're adding things to the muffins, like I'm doing a basic muffin mix, and if you decide you want to make banana muffins, and you're like, well, shoot, I don't have bananas, that's okay. You can add apple or chocolate chips or strawberries. You can have, I used to make my own version of Tim Hortons Fruit Explosion muffins. I just take some berries and add it all in together and make my own muffins that way. You can add anything to a muffin batter pretty much. If you want it savory, fry up some bacon, crumble it up and throw it into the thing. My husband likes hot pepper, so I made him hot pepper muffins one time. You can do anything you want as long as you have your basic recipe. So now I've got my egg and milk and oil there. So now what you do is you add the egg mixture all at once to the flour mixture. So what you want to do is put that, and you make a little well, make a little opening, and you pour in your liquid. You do not want to overmix this. Muffin batter will be lumpy. You don't want it nice and smooth like you do a cake batter. It causes bubbles and it causes dryness if you get it too mixed up. So there we have it. Just stir it just until you can't see any more dry ingredients. You don't want to go to the bottom of your bowl. You scrape all the way down and turn it almost like you're folding. So let's see, you turn and like this. Fold it in, and you want to make sure that everything on the bottom is incorporated into the batter. So there's your batter. You see it's quite thick and it's quite lumpy, but that's exactly what you want. That's a perfect muffin batter. Now to that I'm going to add 1 cup of chocolate chips. You can add more, you can add less, just whatever you like. I think that's about all I have, exactly 1 cup. Well, it's not quite a cup, so there, see, that's what happens. But that's all right, that's enough. And add those in, and again, just gently mix them until the chocolate chips are incorporated. And there you have chocolate chip muffins. I'm going to put these in my muffin containers, in the muffin tins. This should make a dozen, or maybe a dozen and a half, depending on how big you want them, how deep you fill your muffin tins. I mean, I fill mine right up because I want a nice big muffin. So I'm going to line my, instead of buttering the pan, and I believe that was another ingredient I left out when I went through all my list of ingredients to have on hand. You always want butter. If you cook with butter, real butter, that's fine. I cook with margarine, oleo, it doesn't matter. It's flavor-wise, it's not going to change it all that much. If you prefer real butter, you can go for it. It doesn't really matter. So we're going to line up these, and what you do is you get a tablespoon, or you can use an ice cream scooper if you have a good one. That way they're all the same size. I just go ahead and use 2 spoons. I use my 2 tablespoons like this. I take a big tablespoon of the batter, and just like that, a nice big huge scoop of it, and put it right into your muffin tin. You're supposed to fill them about 3/4 of the way full, and that way they rise up nice. So you want a good heaping tablespoon for each one, and that gives you a nice full muffin cup. And these will bake for about 18 to 20 minutes. They don't take long. Muffins bake a lot quicker than cakes because they're smaller. And another little tip, if you're making, say, peanut butter cookies or chocolate chip cookies, oatmeal cookies, whatever kind of cookies you're making, and you find that, okay, I've made 4 dozen, that's all I need, but you still have batter left over, what I do is grease and flour a square pan, and I put the rest of the batter in that and bake it, and then you have like a little cake. So in this case, if I was making chocolate chip cookies, I would have a little chocolate chip cake. And it takes maybe 5 or 10 more minutes extra to bake, but it would taste nice. It's really good. It's quicker than doing a cake, and even though it's cookie batter, it still works the right way. Now I put a little bit too much in some of these, so I didn't even get a dozen, so I'm going to scoop a little bit out. So now I have exactly 1 dozen really nice chocolate chip muffins. Let's see, we have a good angle, there we go. So now I'm going to put those in my preheated oven at 350, and they bake for 18 to 20 minutes, or you take a toothpick or a wooden skewer and you put it into the middle of the muffin, and if it comes out clean, then it's done. Also, you can test it by pushing on the top of it. You tap it on the top, and if it springs back, it's done. Okay, so for the next recipe, I'm going to look in my recipe book and see what kind of cookies I would like to make today. I was going to make snickerdoodles. I've done snickerdoodles in my other videos. If you missed it, go ahead and check it out. And peanut butter cookies are my next best ones. Now my snickerdoodle recipe, it's in this book, but the recipe that I have has been passed down from generation to generation. It was my great-grandmother's, my grandmother's, my mother's, and she gave it to me and my sister. So we followed that recipe. So I think for today I'm going to go ahead and make those. So this is one of those recipes you can dump everything in the bowl, put it all in, mix it all up, and you're good to go. So I'm going to get a clean bowl. That was the one I used for my muffins. I'm going to start off with a clean bowl, and I have my recipe here. So we need 1/2 of butter softened, half a cup of butter softened. That's why I use oleo. I use the margarine rather than butter because it softens it even if you take it right out of the fridge. We usually buy, I can't believe it's not butter. I mean, I can believe it's not butter. It doesn't really taste like it's butter, but it's good. It's a nice oleo to use. It's got a good flavor to it. Alright, so I need 1/2 cup of that. Again, you want to use your round measuring cups. You don't want to use your liquid measuring cups because it will make a little bit of a difference. So where is, let's see, 1/2 cup scoop is in my flour. Alright, so I'm going to measure out a big wooden spoonful and put it in. You just push it down like this and make sure it's nice and full, just like that. Then you got a nice even 1/2 cup full of margarine into the bowl. Okay, the next thing is 1 cup of sugar, and you just use regular white sugar. You don't use brown sugar for these. And when it calls for brown sugar, some recipes will call for light, some recipes will call for dark. There's really not a lot of difference. It just changes the color of your cookie once it's baked. If it's light molasses, light brown sugar, then it'll be lighter. Okay, so to this I'm adding 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, not baking powder. You don't want these aren't going to rise. You want baking soda. And again, make sure you have a container that can seal good because you want to keep it fresh. I usually take these and then put it into a excuse me, I usually take these boxes, when I open it, then I'll put it into a container with a lid, so that way it stays fresh. So 1/4 of a teaspoon, and that goes, there we go. And 1/4 of a teaspoon measuring spoon is not here, so I use 2 1/8 of a teaspoon, so that equals 1/4. So then we want to take 1 egg. Take 1 egg and you crack it in. This is a nice recipe. It's pretty easy. It's a crowd pleaser. Very easy, very nice light cookie. Not a lot of sugar, not a lot of sweetness to it. So your egg, now 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Vanilla, there you go. And I showed you the trick of the vanilla. The cap is exactly 1 teaspoon. So this calls for 1/2 teaspoon, so 1/2 capful. Or you can measure it in your spoons, but trust me, there's a 1/2 I can show you. There's a 1/2 teaspoon. So here's my, let's see, we got that shown yet. There's a 1/2 teaspoon, 1/2 cup of the capful. So I'm going to pour it into my 1/2 teaspoon measuring cup, just to show you how bang on perfect that is. Exactly a 1/2 teaspoon. There you go. Put that in. So then the next thing you want is 1 1/2 cups of flour. Again, you want your flat measuring cup. Fill it up and scrape it off so it's nice and even. 1/2, 1, and 1 1/2. And it goes. Excuse me. And you want, that's all the ingredients for the basic cookies. So it's butter, sugar, baking soda, egg, vanilla, flour. That's all there is into these cookies. It seems like I'm missing something here. I'm not, though, I don't think. Butter, sugar, baking soda, egg, vanilla. Okay. And it's just mix it in here, mix it all up. And then what you want to do is you want to take some sugar and some cinnamon. The recipe says 2 tablespoons of sugar and 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. Those aren't exact measurements, because with these what you're going to do is you're going to make them and roll them into balls and roll them into the cinnamon sugar and put them on the cookie sheet. So it may take a little more than that, it might take a little less. That's not an exact measurement. I start out with that much, and if I need more, I need more, and if it's too much, then I just put it in a container for the next time I make these cookies. There we go, getting it all nice and incorporated. And it's just a very nice, easy recipe. Not a lot of hard work involved, whatever. It's just very straightforward, your basic ingredients. And that's the way most recipes for cookies and muffins are, and cakes. Your basic ingredients that everybody has in their home. Sugar, flour, butter, eggs, milk, baking powder, baking soda, salt, cinnamon, and there you have it. So what we do with these is we get a little bowl, and my cookie tray, so you take a little bit of sugar, and here's my sugar, you take a little bit of sugar. I don't measure, I just eyeball it, because like I said, if I have too much, I just put it into a container, label it cinnamon sugar, and you can use it for another recipe. And what's really nice too, if you want cinnamon sugar, have cinnamon sugar toast. Butter your toast in the morning, sprinkle some cinnamon sugar on there, gives it a little extra. So there's your cinnamon sugar mixture. That's all there is to it. Just like that. Cinnamon and sugar, stir it up. You want more sugar than you do cinnamon. Cinnamon is very good, but it's a strong spice, so you don't want it to be overpowering. So what you do is you take your dough. You don't have to chill this. It's firm enough. You make little balls like this. Well, you know, not quite the size of a walnut, about that big. And you roll it into your cinnamon sugar to coat it all around. Let me get a better angle here. There we go, and you see there, it's all coated in the sugar. You put it on your cookie sheet, and you just press it down lightly, just a little. You don't want to flatten it all the way flat. You don't want it like peanut butter cookies where you flatten it right down. My son came home, stopped in before he went to work this morning with his container that I gave him baked goods in last time we baked, when I did my last video, and Mommy, my baked goods are all gone. So I'm going to be baking and giving some of them to him and his girlfriend. So I take my bowl and give it a shake like this, as when the balls of dough are in there, and it mixes it up really quick and easy. Put them on your cookie sheet. You get 12 to a cookie sheet. These don't really spread, so you can put more. You can put 4 in a row if you'd like. They puff up, but they don't spread. So it's pretty easy to get a lot on a baking sheet. And pretty much that is that. They take about 8 minutes, 8 minutes or so in your oven. You do want to check these quite regularly, because depending on the size of them, if you make them real small. So that's what they look like right now. I'm going to pop these in the oven and make another tray full to show you. And when we're done, I can take those out and show you what they look like when they're baked. So I'm going to set my timer for 8 minutes. That should be plenty of time, because they are small cookies. And I'm going to get another tray. You do not have to butter your trays for these. They do not stick. I mean, if you have non-stick, you usually don't have to butter them anyway, but these cookies do not need to be put on a buttered cookie sheet. Other ones do. Just follow your recipe. There's ingredients that can never be changed on your recipes. The amounts of ingredients especially. your basic ingredients, like your sugar and your flour and your egg and your butter and your milk. All those should stay the same. If you want to change up, if you like with the muffins, you don't have to put chocolate chips. Or, for instance, if you're making peanut butter cookies, you can make peanut butter chocolate chip. You can make peanut butter oatmeal. If you're making oatmeal cookies, you can make oatmeal raisin. You can I've never tried oatmeal chocolate chip, but I imagine they would be pretty, anything's good with chocolate, right? So we're going to finish this tray off, and I'm going to show you how I can change the cocoa powder into, if your recipe calls for one square of baker's chocolate. I'll show you what to do with that. It's pretty easy. Sometimes it'll tell you on the side of the on your baker's cocoa. I'm sorry, your baking cocoa container. It'll tell you what to do. This one is the store brand, so unfortunately they don't put that on the label. If you get the actual brands, then it helps you out with that. Another place to shop to get all your baking goods, if you have a bulk barn in your area, you can get all your ingredients there and just put it in containers, airtight containers, always airtight, especially with spices, and you can just label them what they are. It's a little cheaper when you buy it that way, when you buy it in bulk. So there, that's it. That's how quick and easy making those snickerdoodles are. And all the recipes for these, no matter what book you find, they're pretty much all the same. I just like using the recipe that was passed down. There's a few differences, but not too many. Okay, so now, while that's baking, I'm going to show you what to do with your cocoa powder to make it mimic your baker's chocolate. It comes in squares, because normally it tells you to melt the chocolate anyway. So, get a nice bowl here so you can see it. So what you do for this, if you want to mimic melted bar chocolate, you take 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder, and I'm going to quickly melt a little bit of margarine. You may measure, it's about a tablespoon and a half. I'm going to start with that. You can always add more. I'm just going to melt it really quickly in the microwave for about 20 seconds. And some of them recipes call for that with oil. You can use oil, cooking oil if you like. Either one, it doesn't matter. Whatever you have on hand and whatever one you think is quickest. So we're going to melt that. That took about 15 seconds. And add it to your cocoa powder. And give it a good stir. And there, if you see that now, let me see if I get that in the right place. And there you have what looks like melted chocolate. And this is the exact same thing if this calls for 1 square of melted chocolate. This is what it would equal. 3 tablespoons of baker's cocoa with a tablespoon and a half of melted butter or oil. I just like the butter because it gives it like more of a creamy effect. And there you have it. You have the equivalent of a square of chocolate melted. So that is all we're going to do for today. Just to recap, you always want to get out your ingredients, get everything out that you're going to make so you know you have everything on hand. You don't want to be short an ingredient and have everything in the bowl. Some things you can omit, but some things you can't. For cakes and cookies, it's not a good idea to omit ingredients. If you can cut down, like if it calls for 2 cups of flour, you only have a cup and a half. But if you do that, then you have to cut down on everything else that's in your recipe. Sometimes I'll double a recipe. Sometimes I'll do a recipe in half, because you don't want to have, if for instance, if it calls for 2 cups of flour and you only have 1 cup, but then you turn around and you add the whole egg and the whole cup of milk and the whole cup of sugar. Those ingredients are going to be too much. So you have to make it even. Whatever you omit, how much ever, then you keep going with the recipe. You got to know a little bit of fractions and math when it comes to baking sometimes. That's what it has to be. So my snickerdoodles are just about ready. And the muffins are, I'm going to check the muffins here. Well, we made the snickerdoodles. They got about 2 more minutes. I will show you what the muffins look like. Oh, nicely they puffed up. There we go. Gorgeous, beautiful, nice puffy chocolate chip muffins. And our snickerdoodles have 1 more minute on the timer. Yep, they're going very good. So make sure, if you're new to my channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell so you can get a notification when I am publishing a new video, which hopefully I'll do at least once a week, a couple of times a week. And while you're enjoying the baked goods that I've made or the supper dishes, because I will do cooking as well as baking, and just leave in the comments what you'd like to see and I will do it. I've had a couple of people leave comments for certain things and I have gone ahead and made what they've asked for. And while you're enjoying a nice chocolate chip muffin or a snickerdoodle or a peanut butter cookie, pop over to my other channel, Reading with Grandma, have a story and have a cookie and have some tea while you're at it, or a glass of milk. So there are, took my snickerdoodles out of the oven. There they are. Beautiful, golden brown. That's exactly what you want. You don't want them to stick. You don't want them to be, it's a nice soft cookie. And there we have it. So enjoy the cookies, enjoy the show, and make sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you all next time. Bye now.